Welcome back to Firestorm Games, and in this video we'll be celebrating the release of the new Deathwatch Codex supplement and bringing you another how to quickly paint guide. This time I'll be showing you how to get your Deathwatch Primaris onto the gaming table in as little time as possible. After assembly, the first and probably most important step in painting is to prime so that the later layers of paint can properly adhere to the surface of the model. As you can see, I've chosen to use a black primer for this task, due to which it'll be acting as shading as well as creating the basic colour of the armour. The primer you choose is up to you, as many different brands and methods of application are available. You also notice that I've kept the arm separate from the body. This is entirely optional and will allow you to more easily reach the areas around and behind the bolter. I simply create a rudimentary handle out of some wire that was attached via superglue and a small hole drilled into the shoulder joint. After priming, I could begin to apply a little shading to the black armour of our Deathwatch member, and the main method to achieve this was called dry brushing. Dry brushing requires taking a large and preferably rounded brush like this one here, and then dipping it into your paint. I'm using Corvus Black here, as it's a very dark grey colour and will work as a good first step for lightening the black armour. Then we can start to wipe the brush onto a piece of paper towel or tissue. This will remove any excess paint and also help to work the paint through those bristles. With the brush prepped, we can start to apply some downward, quick strokes to the surface of the model. By only applying a light amount of pressure here, you should find that the paint accumulates to the large flat surfaces, but not into the recessed areas. Because the Corvus Black is extremely dark, we retain the armour's black colouring while simply giving it some lighter shading to the areas towards the top of the model, where light would hit. Next, we are using the same dry brushing technique as before, but this time we're using the lighter grey of Mechanicus Standard Grey. The process is very much the same as before, but as you apply this paint, you want to mainly focus the application around the upper parts of the model and over the raised edges in particular. These are the areas that would expect the light to fall onto, and so they would look brighter, and it helps to continue that shading technique that was started in the last step. Now that we have the basic armour colour, we need to tackle the remaining non-armour areas of the model. I'm starting off with a deep red of Khorne Red here, and have diluted it by mixing in a little water to my paint. This thin mixture can then be applied over the stock of the bolter, the wax of any purity seals, and finally the lenses in the helmet. This red coloration will stand in stark contrast against the solid black armour, and so it should help to add a little more variation to the scheme. The next base coat to be applied is Dryad Bark. This can be used over the leather belt and pouches, but it also works well for the parchment strips of any purity seals that your model has. Like before, I'd recommend thinning out your paint with just a little water before application. And then, if your first application isn't quite there, you can always go back and apply another thin layer. To pick out the metal details, I'm using some of the metallic paint Iron Hand Steel. This is slightly brighter than lead belcher, and so will result in a stronger contrast when we come to apply a wash later on. This Iron Hand Steel was used to not only paint the iconic silver left arm and pauldron of the Deathwatch, but to also tackle any other metallic areas on the model. These included the bolter, the chest detailing, the vents on the power pack, and the piping around the helmet. Pay particular care here not to overspill onto your black armour either. But if you do, you can use some Abaddon Black and some Corvus Black to help fix these mistakes. Armed with another metallic paint, I next set about painting some of the gold and brass detailing. Using some Retributor Armour, I base coated the crest on the bolter, the skull on the pauldron and the chest, and the shell casings in the bolter's magazine. Should your marine be carrying any other trinkets, you can paint over these areas as well. At the moment, some of the areas are looking a little flat. And so to bring out the details in these areas, I'll be applying a wash of Nuln Oil, which can be applied over pretty much the whole model. As it's applied, it will flow into those recessed areas between the panels, creating shading and adding depth. Personally, I found that mixing a little water or Lamium medium into your wash will result in a mixture that is much easier to apply and one that will give a more subtle shading result. And here we have the finished Deathwatch Intercessor, which can be painted in around 30 to 40 minutes. This time can easily be shaved down even further if you were to paint several models simultaneously in a batch. After painting the model, I applied some Vallejo texture gel to the base and a little dry brushing to create a simple basing scheme, before spraying the whole model with a matte varnish and applying a small tuft of grass. Whilst this guide focused on just an intercessor, you could apply the same techniques used here to other Deathwatch units as well. If you enjoyed this guide to getting your miniature painted and ready for gaming in as little time as possible, then please do let us know in the comments below, and if you have any suggestions for future tutorials, then leave those below as well. You can find this kit and all of the paints used in this video on the Firestorm Games web store for at least 10% off the RRP, and you can find a link to the site in the description below. And so we just want to finish off by saying a big thank you for watching this video, and we hope to see you again on Firestorm Games.